Hey everybody, I'm Tyler from Plastic Weekly, and we're here at the Canadian Open Bouldering Nationals at Up the Block, and I've got Udo Neumann here with me. Thanks very much for coming here. You've been spending a bunch of time in Canada. You were here in January for a training camp, and now you're here. What are your impressions of the Canadian bouldering scene after spending some time?
There's a huge potential, that's for sure. And of course, I've been following Sean, as everybody has over the last decade, but now really, there's Canadian is one of the sleeping giants in bouldering for sure.
Cool. You are on your way to Peru, from what I understand. What are you doing down in South America?
Yeah, another workshop with Malek, and yeah, we are very much looking forward to that. Will be an adventure for sure. I know that the Brazilian youth coach will be there, because I think one aspect is definitely that the people attending will be very different, like knowledge-wise, like what they're interested in. We had a little Facebook group for them to post questions on, and some are, you can really tell that they come from rock climbing, or they it remains to be seen how much they're up to date in bouldering contests. But this is the fun of it.
Are you going down mostly to talk about competitive bouldering, or are you talking about route setting or coaching?
Again, this is part of that will be interesting.
You'll find out when you get there.
Yes, like so far they were only interested in like physical, or I shouldn't say only, but the main question was like physical preparation, periodization for some reason. So we'll see. The wall is not very big, but at least it's apparently it's at the university in Lima. Okay. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
I think they'll get a good clinic out of it. I'm excited for that. Now, you were here in January in Montreal doing a clinic for Canadian athletes, and afterwards I was speaking to a coach who attended, and he was talking about some thoughts you had expressed about the evolution of climbing movement and what influences have caused that change. We hear a lot of athletes talking about the new, all these running and jumpy moves, and people feel differently about that. But you had some interesting insight on why that has come through. Could you explain some of that for everybody watching?
Yeah, first of all, I must really emphasize on, if people talk about climbing and somehow pretend that now with the new bouldering contest it's all in circus tricks and so, from my point of view, that's really BS. No, we all benefit from the millions of years we spent on the trees, this is what climbing is. Climbing is basically navigating in three-dimensional space, upwards, downwards, and also a lot of jumping, for example. So when people kind of talk about like this is not true climbing anymore, they mainly are talking about steep limestone, sport climbing. That if you look at it, it was just a fraction of the climbing history. Was really where most people. This was the activity that most people did, sport climbing, and so I mean, this is for me that's important to at least keep in mind, that basically what our attraction towards climbing is, I think it's genetically from living in this three-dimensional environment where climbing was the first means of locomotion. Yeah. So, and basically now with a new seamless mats in the Boulder gyms or so, it's almost going back to this time. It's not that the gibbon or so has a safe environment, not at all. Mm-hmm. But we as human beings, we wouldn't be willing to take these risks. Just for our enjoyments, but now with the seamless mats and the holes that make it really hard to get hurt on, it allows us to explore these kinds of locomotion means and the funky so-called circus tricks again. Yeah. And I see that it's basically a linear progression. If you look at it, the more risk is involved in climbing, for human beings it is, and in the recent since 100 years, of course, the more careful you have to be. There's the 3-point rule, then it was, in my mind, it was Chris Sharma who made the new style that a foothold, for example, is not something you stand on, but it can be also used to jump off from. That was crucial. I mean, at this generation, some climbers did it, but it was most obvious or came to the public knowledge because of Chris Sharma, you know, and he called it climbing in the 90s, you know, where we would jump off. But then there was still some risk involved. Even in the early days of sport climbing, it was still risky. I mean, you had to know what you're doing. Yeah. And it was just till recently, till these new Boulder gyms, where you could be like 4 years old, know nothing, you know, you're a total kid, and you could, with these gyms, it's almost, well, it can be done to enjoy yourself, but it must be a combination of many unfortunate events that happen for you to get injured in a modern bouldering gym, you know. And this is and of course, this is how you learn to climb in a totally safe environment. Of course, you come up with funkier solutions. You know? Otherwise, it would be boring. There's no reason for you to hold anything back, trying to cross huge gaps and stuff like this.
When you look into the future and you see, you know, an evolution in climbing technology, is there anything you're keeping an eye out for that might make another change in, you know, what we think of as climbing movement?
I still think that if you look at the orangutan, in 2011 I spent a month in Sumatra following wild orangutans, and they're still far beyond what we can. Somebody like Tomoa Nagasaki can do really well for a couple of moves, but eventually he's going to get confused because, I mean, compared to a gibbon or orangutan, he still needs a lot of practice time. And so I think there are lots, especially in like combination, or if you think about like the way Janja Gambret swings, you know, the way how you use your legs for brachiation, for swinging, you know, and for, like not till like even 5 years ago, most people were not thinking of their legs at all when they were so-called campusing. But now Tomoa and Janja and all the modern boulderers using their legs a lot more, and not in a very three-dimensional ways, you know. So the swing can be horizontal even to help you with your upper body pulling. Pulling again, and I think we will see a huge progress in this, or I shouldn't say progress, but development in this regard. You know, like that people use the, you know, climbing is mostly considered to be a closed kinetic chain locomotion, because you have a hold and then you move, you know. But now, if you look at all the modern boulderers, they use their free what they call pogo, or much more, and I think we will see much more of these and more complex ways of how you blend these different trajectories together. So it's very exciting. And if you watch, for example, the Japanese championships, where they allow the kids to compete with Youth B already, you see so many funky solutions, you know. And even I was watching last year I was watching the live stream, and there was one situation where a tiny girl was standing in the splits, but her one foot was planted above her head into a roof. Yeah. And I was watching it, and I thought, okay, this is a nice solution, but there's no way that she gets out of this situation. And I turned around and did some more work, and then I was looking back, and she had the top. And this is kind of typical. We almost cannot foresee. I mean, we old people, we cannot really foresee what it means to start. Have been starting climbing with 4 years in a Boulder gym.
Well, thank you very much for your input. You heard it here first. If you want to know what moves are going to be set in the future, look to the jungles, I guess, of Sumatra, but also to the kids. They're the ones making it. So anyway, thank you very much, Udo. For more from Canadian Open Bouldering Nationals, stay tuned to our YouTube or also plasticweekly.com. We'll see you guys in the next one.